Hello, welcome to Dialogue. I'm Han Dong in Beijing. China is commemorating its 80th anniversary of the Long March, an epic journey that redefined the whole country. At a commemoration convention on Friday, Chinese President Xi Jinping hailed the Long March as a stately monument in the history of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So what legacy has the Long March left for China? How is the event perceived overseas? And is the Long March spirit still relevant today? To answer these questions and more, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Tao Wenzhao, a senior research fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Mr. Einar Tangen, author and columnist. But before we get started, let's take a look at this.
80 years on, the epic feat of the Long March is still capable of stirring the hearts of people. On Friday, party leaders gathered in Beijing's Great Hall of the People to honour the commitment by those who participated in the expedition. General Secretary Xi Jinping called on the Chinese people to carry on the spirit left by the Long March. Xi spoke about the difficulties that the Red Army faced during the 12,500-kilometre trek that took place between 1934 and 1936. With more than 600 battles fought, almost 100 rivers crossed, and more than 40 mountains climbed, Xi said the Long March should be seen as a remarkable miracle as soldiers conquered the limits of human existence. Xi said the lofty ideals and firm beliefs will always be the political soul of the Chinese communists. During the past decades, China has made a meteoric rise to become the world's second largest economy and the biggest trading nation. Now, standing at a crossroads, China needs to hold fast the Long March spirit to press ahead with the economic, political and military reforms. And Xi stressed China's anti-corruption campaign.
坚定不移推进党风廉政建设和反腐败
Waveringly build a clean party and fight against corruption. We need to purify and reform our party to improve its ability to lead the country, to prevent corruption and to withstand risks. The Communist Party of China should always be the backbone of leading the country along the socialist path.
Xi vowed to build a strong and prosperous country, and the CPC would stay close to the people of China, just like the Long Marchers aspired to 80 years ago.
So let's get the discussion started. Gentlemen, exactly 80 years ago, the Red Army reached Shanxi province in northwest China and concluded the Long March. In his speech on a Friday, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Mr. Xi Jinping, said that every generation has its Long March. I believe he's not only talking to the CPC, the Communist Party of China, but also the Chinese people. So let's start with the CPC. What's the Long March right now, Mr. Tao?
Oh, well, today's Long March, of course, it's a long march to modernization. It's a long march of realizing Chinese dream. It's a long march to China's great rejuvenation.
Mm-hmm. What's your take, Anna?
Well, to sum it up in the word determination, when I look at the Long March, you can cruise the internet, whatever you want to see, you'll see that everybody sees this as a turning point in history. The fact that you had 86,000 troops start out and 4,000 of that original make it to Yunnan, it was a testimony to luck, willpower, and belief that has really stood the test of time. The question is, how do you make that relevant today? For me, what she said in terms of this is a way, a path, it is not a destination. We're very perhaps different from the original ideas of utopian life.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look back at history first. So after the Long March, the Communist Party of China survived, then gained victory in the revolution, and finally they established the People's Republic. So if you look at special chapter in history, what do you think are some core elements the Long March provided to the victory of the CPC?
Actually, I think the Long March is the brightest page of the history of Chinese Revolution, is the brightest page of the history of the Chinese Communist Party. Because this is, as Inga just said, a turning point from setbacks to success. And this is a turning point of the Chinese Revolution. Before that, we know that the Communist Party suffered setbacks after setbacks. And then after that, during the Long March, we know at the Zhenyi Conference, Mao Zedong's leadership was established during in the Communist Party, and after that, after the Long March, the CPC developed and strengthened its basis in northern Shanxi province, Shanxi, Gansu, Qinghai province, and then developed its Red Army, and then achieved, as you just said, the victory of the Chinese Revolution.
Right. What about some specific elements, would you say?
Well, first one, this is leadership, Mao Zedong's leadership in the Communist Party. Second one, Long March not only survived, the Red Army not only survived, and those elements are actually the bones of the Red Army and of the Chinese Revolutionary Army. And the third one, of course, I think the most important thing is the spirit of Long March. That is to uphold the ideal, lofty ideal, and overcome any difficulties.
Well, Mr. Tao just put the strong leadership of the party as the most important element to a success. What's your take, Mr. Tangen?
No, I agree, but it wasn't a smooth transition. There was tremendous infighting within the party. There, with such incredible losses, such incredible trials, there was a lot of different voices at the table. What was unique in this is that Mao came out on top, that his way of fighting, this rear guard with guerrilla action as opposed to conventional force against force, the fact that he was able to move even that far, it was really quite something, and literally a testament to just pure willpower, because to do what they did, absent water, absent food, and fighting all along the way, incredible.
Yeah, I want to add something to Inga just said, in early 1960s, Edgar Snow, a famous American journalist, asked Chairman Mao,
the man who wrote The Red Star of China.
Yeah, the Red Star of China. What was the most difficult period or point in your revolutionary life? Mao Zedong said, the struggle with the Zhang Guotao during the Long March. Because that struggle, because at that time, when the first Red Army, led by Mao and Zhu De, met with the fourth Red Army in Maogong, Sichuan province. Actually, the Central Red Army, the first Red Army, has just 10,000 people and very tight and with poor equipment and
they're facing 1 million Kuomintang.
And the fourth Red Army, led by Zhang Guotao, had 40,000, and they were fed properly, and they had a very good equipment. Zhang Guotao actually, he did not obey the Communist Party's Central Committee and Politburo. He actually established another Central Committee.
So he put his personal political interests ahead of the party's beliefs.
So that struggle actually was the biggest struggle during the history of the Communist Party. And to defeat Zhang Guotao, to win the victory in this struggle, actually was the guarantee of the success of the Long March.
For the Western side, it would be the discipline. This idea that this was the institution of the modern Chinese state that was going to become the PRC. The tremendous infighting resulted in having a clear leadership structure, and that allowed it to go forward. So it was not an easy period, but like forging steel, it really, those who remained, I think were very committed at that point, and they formed the backbone of what would become.
So universally speaking, how can an expedition like this forge an army and even a political party?
No, first off, I mean, some of the people that did not make it were actually, they broke off and they became party cadres, and they went into the areas that they're around, and they started basically saying, ideologically spreading the word of communism and Marxism. But this did not mean a lot until people realized exactly what the Long March had accomplished. The fact that he had escaped a 1 million man army that was chasing him night and day, that had airplanes, tanks, trucks, everything, well, they were on foot or with donkeys. They literally didn't have anything. Their supply lines were non-existent. They had to forage off the land. That became a symbol that with willpower, with belief, you can make change. So now all of these cadres who have broken off into the people, people looked at them with renewed respect. You can get this done. You were able to avoid this massive army and do all these things. So it became, this is why it was such a big turning point, but this idea of discipline, of working through hardship, I think is particularly close to what Xi Jinping is thinking today. He does not want people to become lazy and unresolved and say, oh, it'll take care of itself. He says China's in an active struggle. If it doesn't get past the middle class malaise, that's the middle income gap, they will have real difficulties going forward. A lot of the stability of China is based on this ability to deliver a good life, a hopeful life. That's why almost over 70% of all Chinese people on the street are hopeful. And it's because of things like this. But he has a long way to go within the party itself because he has to reform it. Things kind of, in his mind, I think, got a little bit off track, and that's why you see this corruption crackdown. So I think he's making it very clear that the way forward will never be different. There will always be struggles, there will always be difficulties, hardships, and if China is to succeed, it must always recognize that.
Yeah, I think that's also why he put discipline as an emphasis of party construction himself. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. You're watching Dialogue on CCTV News. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about Long March spirit. So, gentlemen, why is the spirit of Long March still relevant today, Mr. Tang?
I think perseverance really is their character. When they think which is right, which is correct, they stick to that, and they never change their behavior, and they just go ahead and overcome all the difficulties. Oh, of course, today's situation is completely different from that period, of course, and we have accomplished a lot, we have achieved a lot, and especially since 1978, China, Deng Xiaoping launched the reform and openness. China's economic growth is so outstanding in the world. Now China is the major engine of the world economic development. But relatively speaking, China's GDP per capita is still pretty low. It's still pretty low, and we still have 70 million people on the poverty line. So, and we still have a long way to go in our modernization. So what do you think are the major challenges in the near future? Because you talked about poverty alleviation. China is going to eliminate poverty by the year 2020. It's not very far away. It's not very far away, but even we alleviated the poverty from those people, China's economic level is still pretty low in comparison with those developed countries, and so we have a long way to go, and there are a lot of challenges, including, for instance, today we are making economic adjustment of economic structure, and we have to pay attention to preserve our environment, and it has been for more than a week. We had a smog in Beijing, and we also, as an anti-corruption campaign, this is one of the big challenges. So we are still facing with a lot of challenges. Those challenges are different from the Red Army was faced during the Long March, but we still need that spirit. We still should have a lofty idea, and we still should be determined, resolved to overcome all the difficulties, to go through the hardships.
Well, Mr. Tang, earlier you mentioned a little bit about challenges the CPC is facing right now. So tell us more about that in terms of governance.
Well, in governance, I mean, it literally, when you have a one-party system, the pressure on the party to produce people who are capable of doing it. I don't care what system you have. If you don't have good people running it, it will fail. It will fail the people, it will fail governance. I think what Xi is trying to do here is turn this into an inspirational moment. In the US, we have the spirit of 1776, the revolutionary spirit. In France, it was Vive la Révolution, right? And long live the revolution. In the Magna Carta and things. Every nation at its beginning goes through tremendously difficult times in terms of change. And he's trying to remind people that China has changed, that all of the things that have just been mentioned in terms of getting pollution right, getting poverty right, all of these things are doing it. The difference a little bit is that he needs the party to be in line. This is what the anti-corruption drive is about. Too often in the West, people are saying, oh, it's just a power consolidation. You know, these are the same people, I mean, 5, 10 years ago were complaining that there's too much corruption in China. Once somebody does it, it automatically. So China is always often in a position, no matter what it does, it is perceived the wrong way. And this has been an ongoing thing. Part of it is that in the Western world, we believe the other shoe is about to drop, that any embrace of capitalism will automatically involve a shift towards democracy. And this has not happened, and you still get people who use this as an axiom of everything that they believe. So this has been a problem. So China is confronting not only issues at home, but internationally. I mean, trying to create this Belt and Road Initiative at the same time that they're trying to deal with border issues. These types of things are continuing to be challenges, and it's always going to be a path. There's never going to be a time when it's all solved. You know, in the U.S., we had the same issue. When we, quote, won the Cold War, well, we didn't really win. What it was is all of a sudden we had a lot of the world's problems on our doorstep as the most powerful country. People expected us to do it, and we weren't prepared for that. So China, hopefully, China will learn from the mistakes of Pax Romana, Pax Britannia, Pax Americana.
Yeah. So talking about back to the Long March, do you think it can provide a key for those who don't understand China enough to have a better understanding of the Communist Party of China?
Not really. I mean, the truth is there are many people who read it, but they're mostly educated intellectuals, and they'll read about it. I don't know that there's always some skepticism. There's always somebody out saying, oh no, it didn't happen that way. Well, you know, was George Washington standing up in the boat when they crossed the Delaware? I mean, these are trivial issues. When you get down to how was the nation created, how do people treat that in terms of inspiration? And I think these are the main messages that are coming through this. China has a long way to go, and he's trying to remind people of that.
Now, Mr. Tao, do you think there's something universal in the Long March spirit?
Oh, well, yes, I think so. You know, every country.
What is it?
Every country, if it wants to be a strong country, a wealthy country, want to be a prosperous country, it must overcome some difficulties. There are, even in the history of the United States, you have a lot of difficulties. Civil War and the Great Depression, and even the most recent financial crisis. You know, when President Obama took office, in his first inauguration speech, he just compared the financial crisis to the hardships in the U.S. history, and he used the George Washington's work to encourage the American people to unite, to be patient, to be brave. Yeah, so I think every country, this kind of spirit is relevant.
And I want to add something to that. One of the, you know, in America there was this kind, the greatest generation, those who came out the Great Depression and 2 world wars, and they put their heads down and they worked very hard. They had suffered, but they were willing to invest in society in ways and things. Now, after that, the baby boomer generation, which I'm unfortunately part of, and in China, the post-80s people, I mean, they have not suffered the same kind of it. And I think there's always a feeling that these generations have to learn that it's not just about yourself. It cannot be about selfishness, because if you do that, if everyone is selfish, there's nothing for anybody. And how do you instill that? So I see this as inspirational.
Yeah. So, Mr. Tao, how do you think the Long March spirit can appeal to the country's youngsters? Because, as Aina just put it, they live in a comfortable life. They've never experienced any great hardships in their life.
Exactly. Long March has been away for 80 years, and I think the young generation probably knows very little about Long March. And the Long March itself is a very complicated event because there are 4 different armies, and every army went different ways, different rules. Yeah. So when we are talking about Long March, we generally talk about the Central Red Army, but there are still the 2nd Red Army, 4th Red Army, the 25th Red Army, and they also accomplished a lot and went through the hardships. So there are a lot of stories can be told, can be discussed, can be taught in our classroom and also with our medias. So I think it's not just today we are commemorating the 80th anniversary. We are talking about Long March. Even after that, we will still talk about Long March, about the brave and those Red Armies who sacrificed their lives. This spirit will be relevant in the decades to come.
Well,
The question is, how do you pass it on?
Yeah. So, do you think there's some international experience that China can learn from? Because history, wartime stories, hero stories, decades, even hundreds of years away from people's daily lives.
And that is the problem. I think you see that throughout the world right now, the post-war Cold War malaise that's happening now. Most of the generations don't have any idea about these things. They're not used to sacrificing. So it's a global issue. And I certainly don't want war or hardship to be part of anybody's life. But the fact is that unless you learn these lessons, you cannot, you can't implement the products of them. So this is the difficulty. In many places, for instance, John F. Kennedy started the Peace Corps. What he wanted to do is reconnect people to the realities, to other people's realities, people who did not have it as well as you do. Right? I think programs like that can be very, very useful in putting society back together instead of the small group of haves, the middle class, and those who have not.
So, if you're going to explain the Long March or the Long March spirit, its meaning to a Western audience, how would you put it?
I give them the basic facts about how far they traveled, the fact that they had no food and water and things like that, but it was just sheer grit and determination and belief. If they hadn't had those, and luck, if they hadn't had those elements, New China would never have been born. All right, or it would have taken a significantly longer period of time. So it's not a question of whether you ideologically believe in communism or whatever. The issue is that you had a band of brothers, let us say, there's women involved.
Excuse me. By the way, when I studied in the United States once in early 1980s, once I watched TV and that program called Believe It or Not, and that night was talking about Long March.
Right.
Yeah. So I think still early days from Edgar Snow in 1936. He interviewed Mao Zedong, Zhu De, and other.
But what's the angle? Is it historical or is it ideological?
It's historical.
It's historical.
I think it's fine, and it's mainly talking about the facts. How many people went, how long, and how many days, etc. So I think it's okay.
So, Mr. Tao, I want to ask you a personal question. So, which part do you think the Long March spirit is your personal inspiration?
Well, actually, I think the perseverance. I did not have such a hardship as the Red Army soldiers used to have. But in our work, in my academic research work, perseverance is still very, very important. I have been with the Chinese Academy for 52 years. Yeah, in these 52 years, I think I stick to the modern history study, American study, Sino-American relations study. So I think perseverance is very important.
Right, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input. And that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CCTV News. I'm Pan Zheng in Beijing. Bye-bye.